I'm here to empower you to take control of your networking and your interviewing by taking you through my process for how I develop better questions for these situations. My name is Matt Tomets, and creating better questions is one of the easiest ways to quickly elevate your performance when networking and interviewing, either as the interviewee or the interviewer. Please subscribe if you want to stay up to date with my content, my video series, How to Network More Effectively. Please like the video if you like the video and comment down below for feedback and what you want to see next. In this video, I'm going to talk about why creating better questions is important, where it applies, the goal of creating better questions, how to do it, take you through my full process of how I created the questions when I hosted the interview of Lucas White for SAMSON Equipment's Strength Coach Collective, and then finish it up with action steps on how you can create better questions yourself. In my recent job search, I've been making a ton of phone calls with people in sports performance at Power 5 universities, professional sports teams, and sports science technology companies. And my favorite moment during these phone calls is when I ask them a question and they get a little speechless and then say something like, "That's a really good question," or "I've never been asked that question before." And I take a lot of pride in asking really good questions when I network because it's my opportunity to give value back to that person when connecting with them in a professional context, as networking is exchanging value, going back to my first video on how to network more effectively. Why is it important to ask better questions? It's your opportunity to be different, your opportunity to stand out in their mind. It's your opportunity to show them that you care, that you will take the time to research about them, to put thought and effort into creating good questions, and just add value back to them. And it's tough in networking when you're reaching out to someone or looking up to someone. You're proverbially below them in the networking chain, but showing them that you will take your time and effort to be thoughtful, do your research, things that I said, is a very simple way to add value back to them. Where does creating better questions apply? It applies to networking or connecting with people in a professional context. And it applies to interviews, either as the interviewer, let's say for a podcast or a school project, something like that, or as the interviewee for a job. And having good questions as the interviewee is a very quick way to stand out. Kind of like I said, showing that you care and that you're willing to put in a little bit of extra time and effort for the interview and that potential job. Consequently, it's also one of the quickest ways to blow an interview by showing you're not prepared and you're not willing to put in that extra time and effort to create those questions. What is the goal of creating better questions? If I had to sum it up in one sentence, it would be this. The goal of creating better questions is to help that person realize how cool their journey and job is. It's super easy to get caught up in just the pace of life that we forget to reflect not only on where we've been, but also where we are now. If you're networking with someone or interviewing for a job, chances are they're really busy doing a ton of awesome stuff. Hence why you want to connect with them or potentially work for them. So creating better questions is a really simple way to help them reflect and to give value to them. How do you come up with better questions? First, I'll give you some brief bullet points just to keep in the back of your head as I take you through the full process of how I created these questions when I hosted an interview for SAMSON Equipment's Strength Coach Collective. And this is the process that I go through every time, either before I'm about to make a professional networking phone call, when I'm about to host an interview, either for my own podcast or for the Strength Coach Collective, or if I'm about to be an interviewee for a potential job. Here's the bullet points. First, literally, if you could ask them any question relative to your connection, what would it be? Do your research. Care. Be natural. Focus on lessons, stories, and experiences. Focus on transitions in life. Focus on unexpected things. And no question is a bad question for now. A quick backstory on this opportunity. So the director of marketing for SAMSON Equipment stumbled upon my podcast, listened to a few episodes, thought I would be a good fit to host some of their episodes. He DM'd me on Instagram, explained the opportunity to me, we hopped on the phone, it was a good fit, and the rest is history. I did my first interview with Riley Allen, went pretty well, and then he emailed me and Lucas White saying that we would be together for this second interview, and away we go. So first, right off the bat, I want to say that with the internet and social media nowadays, there is really no excuse. Now, people are going to have varying amounts of information about them on the internet, but there's still no excuse not to try and to show that you put in at least some effort. So let's get into it. So I was given his name and his school email, but he didn't actually say San Jose State University. So the first thing I did was looked up Lucas White SJSU because his email was sjsu.edu. Then I clicked on his profile for his school and nothing. I got his job title, Assistant Athletic Performance Coach, Men and Women's Soccer and Track and Field, which we'll come back to later. I go back to my search. Let's go on Twitter. It's difficult with some people at universities because it will be a lot of retweets of a lot of their school content, school tweets and stuff like that. For example, right here. So not too much of his own content, just a lot of stuff he retweeted. Hey, there's my interview I did. But I like going to the media because it'll be all of the pictures that they put out there. So a coaching challenge, profile picture, talking about mental illness, which is pretty cool, but just 3 of his own media, not too much. But also with these social media sites, the bio, the quick little snippet, what they choose to put about themselves can potentially tell a lot. So 30, he's got some accreditations, the area codes of where he's been, his title, and then 2 hashtags, which we will come back to later. Let's go to Instagram. So same thing, same hashtags, and I noticed that in his link was an article to Elite FTS. Now, in strength and conditioning, sports performance, Elite FTS is one of the brand names, one of the classic names in just the equipment they put out, the content they put out, and just everything along those lines. So I click on the link. Conjugate in college, my first experience with the conjugate system in Division I women's soccer. So he wrote an article for Elite FTS, which is pretty cool, and I knew that I was going to ask a question about that. And when you come across stuff like this for a potential interview or a company or just networking, read this stuff, read their content. So I read this whole article. I liked the titles of the different sections, how I arrived to this point in my career, what the program actually was. Nothing went according to plan. Here's what actually happened. What about, a common question? What about the Olympic lifts? What we found, what I would do differently. So definitely a very thought out article. It was received pretty well, a lot of comments, things like that. But there was a quote that I'm not gonna find in here, but there's a quote that I really liked, which I will share in the question whenever I get to reading the actual questions I came up with. I was looking at, just reading the title and everything, and I actually trained one of the athletes in this picture back home in Chicago, and this was at Indiana State University. And I just recognized that, so I put that at the bottom of my piece of paper to bring up with whenever we started talking. Then I'm back to his Instagram, and I see a lot of lifting stuff. Pretty big dude. Giving him a quick flex, quick shout out. And I just kept scrolling, see a lot of lifting stuff, kind of like that. I forgot what specific post it was, but I noticed that some of his athletes had commented on his Instagram posts, oh, you gotta do this in the weight room, or just, interacting with his content of him lifting. So I thought that was pretty cool. Going back to our internet search, next go to LinkedIn. Now LinkedIn, it does give the other person a notification that you looked at their profile, but there's no shame in my game. I'm networking, I'm trying to do my research. That's just part of the process. So same thing, you have his title, where he's from, and then the experience. This is gonna be one of the main things about their profile, depending on their privacy settings, because I was obviously not connected with him because I hadn't met him yet. So he's now the Assistant Athletic Performance Coach. He was a graduate assistant at Indiana State, which is what he wrote the article about. He was at New Mexico State University for basically 2 years as an intern and a coach. An intern at Mississippi State, Power 5, that's pretty cool. Football, personal trainer, and then high school. Another thing I noticed was that he did his undergrad at University of Southern Indiana, which is in the Great Lakes Valley Conference, which is in the same conference as Truman State University, where I did my undergrad and played baseball. So that's another opportunity or just common connection point that I put at the bottom of my piece of paper to bring up whenever we started chatting. So scrolling back down, strength training, coaching, personal training, and then just all of the places. But if we were to do this chronologically from the bottom up, high school, personal trainer, intern at a Power 5, intern and coach at a D1, not Power 5, but D1, to graduate assistant, to now San Jose State. So kind of just following along that journey of high school, Power 5, smaller D1, intern coach, GA, now to a new coach, just trying to wrap my head around that. I thought it was pretty interesting, kind of just that whole journey. Because there wasn't too much on his bio at San Jose State University, actually nothing, I looked up his next most recent job, which was his graduate assistantship at Indiana State for just the staff directory, and on that search nothing popped up. So then I went to Lucas White, Southern Indiana. That's where he did his undergrad, and a lot of strength and conditioning coaches happened to play college sports, so I wanted to see if he had played sports there. So I looked up Lucas White, Southern Indiana, and I scrolled down and I got this link for the performance staff at Indiana State. And there he is right there. And Southern Indiana popped up because they talked about his undergrad in this website. So I scroll down to find him, and there's a ton more about him than on the San Jose State website, where he's a full coach as opposed to just being GA here. That's why you have to do a variety of searches to see anything that'll pop up. When I looked up Indiana State, Lucas White, this website did not pop up. So it's important to be thorough in your search and just doing a ton of different searches. First year as a GA, track and field, cross country, women's soccer, assisting with football. So those sports are coming back, which we saw in his job title at San Jose State University. They talk about his time at New Mexico State, track and field, that is again, baseball, softball. And then they talk about when he was at Mississippi State, then his time at high school. And they talk about football, basketball, baseball, volleyball, women's soccer. He's from Indiana, so I'm from Illinois, Midwest, another common connection point. So I think that is all of the information I had for my searches. So now I'll take you through all of the questions that I came up with. So here's the final product of the questions I came up with for my interview. At the top, I put Lucas White, his job title, Assistant Athletic Performance Coach, and then SAMSON Equipment Strength Coach Collective. Welcome to the Strength Coach Collective presented by SAMSON Equipment. I'm your host, Matt Tomitz, and I'm joined today by Lucas White, who is the Assistant Athletic Performance Coach of football, men's soccer, women's soccer, track and field at San Jose State University. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How you doing, man?
Good. And for those who are not familiar with your background, could you please enlighten us on where you are now and where you've been? Just for context for the listener, that was one of SAMSON's questions that they like asking their interviewees. And also it's just good to create context, like I said. Second, this was my own question. What's the coolest story you have thus far in your career? Like if you had to pick one to tell, what would it be?
Oh my God. So there's a lot. I mean, I think you don't go around this field and meet a strength coach that doesn't have at least a cool story or two to tell. But
this was my own question, one that I ask on my podcast and that I like asking to everyone. Third question. And then next big question. So going from high school to SEC intern to WAC intern and coach, and then the Valley GA, and then now to Mountain West coach. Could you compare and contrast kind of on that journey, the different levels, positions, and also your decision to go back to school?
So that's a great question. A lot of impact there.
So as I said earlier, going through his LinkedIn profile of just this kind of journey of different levels to different positions within those levels, I thought was pretty interesting. Going back to comparing and contrasting, like I said earlier. So you have SEC intern, Mississippi State, WAC, New Mexico State as an intern and also a coach. You have Missouri Valley Conference, or the Valley, as a GA, and then you have the Mountain West now as San Jose State University coach, starting with high school. So he's seen basically anything and everything besides professional strength and conditioning. All these different positions and all of these different levels of of competition. So I thought that would be super interesting to ask. Next, question number 4.
Get into our next big question. So two big and inspiring hashtags on your social media. Hashtag high quality juice and hashtag work wins. First, could you explain what that means to you, your staff, your athletes, and kind of how this came to be? And then second, do you think it's important for teams to have kind of like a saying or a hashtag to have as their own?
So that's one of those things where a simple hashtag, how many people are going to ask about that one specific thing about their social media profiles? And that actually turned into a really cool answer where work wins, he kind of just got from one of the coaches that he used to work with. But high quality juice came from an interview question of describe your coaching style in 3 words. So that was just a really cool answer, a really cool question, but how just that little part of 2 of his social media account bios came to be. Question number 5 is about the article he wrote for Elite FTS.
Get on to our next question. Coach White is a published author on Elite FTS. His article, Conjugate in College, My First Experience with the Conjugate System in Division I Women's Soccer. First, just could you share on that whole process of just getting published on Elite FTS? And a quote from your article is, if there's one thing I know for sure, it's that I'll never have all of the answers as a strength coach. So I'm sure that quote might have been thrown around a lot, but from going from more of a theoretical standpoint to what does that mean, how you do your job, and an actionable thing, like how does it actually manifest itself?
So he's been there, done that, something that not a lot of us has done. So could he just share about that whole process? 5B, I retyped a quote from his article, and then I put below it in brackets, kind of just for a little bit more context for him to wrap his head around the question, because I've heard this quote before in strength and conditioning: you'll never know everything. There's always more content out there. But it was meaningful enough for him to put in his article. So like, how does that actually affect how you do your life? Like we can all accept that this quote is a thing, and yes, it's true, but like, what does that actually mean? So there's question 5. And I actually ended up switching question 6 and 7. I called an audible on the fly just because it made more sense in just the flow of the questions. So question 7 that turned into question 6.
And that topic leads into the next question. I'm gonna skip around a little bit. So you're a pretty strong dude yourself.
I'm glad you think so.
How important is it that your athletes see/know that you train? You're big on Instagram. I saw some videos on your Instagram. I actually saw some of your athletes comment on it, and that's what kind of inspired this question. So is it important that they know you train yourself, and does it help that they know that you practice what you preach, you've been there, done that, you get it? Is it more relatable, or could you just enlighten us on kind of that whole topic?
This was mainly inspired by seeing his athletes actually interacting with his lifting and training content on his social media. And I know that this is maybe a little bit more important in sport-specific situations where if you've played that sport before, the athlete just might have a little bit more trust in what you're saying because you can speak that language or you quote-unquote get it. But does it apply for lifting? If you're a strength and conditioning coach, of course you have to practice what you preach, but does it require more than just being smart and being a good technical coach? Does it matter that you go and work out yourself? Because that seemed like a pretty big part of his social media. So I wanted to ask it mainly because of the athlete interaction I saw. Question 6, which turned into question 7.
Next question. So you work with sports like track and field and cross country at San Jose State, and I believe you have at some of your other previous stops. So what can people that work with more traditional sports, football, baseball, basketball, what can they learn from your experiences working with those less traditional sports?
So I saw these common smaller sports, soccer, track and field, cross country, in multiple of his positions, descriptions, but he's also worked with some of the bigger sports. So what can people that work with the bigger sports learn from your experience with these smaller sports? Just a compare and contrast. And that actually turned into a really good answer that I liked, where he said, well, everyone has to start somewhere, and often when you're starting out as a GA, whatever it may be, you'll get some of those smaller non-traditional sports. And basically his answer was, well, Why do those sports not deserve your football effort or your big sport effort? Those sports that everyone wants to work with just because they're more traditional. So I was very satisfied with how that question turned out. Question number 8, which is a combination of Samson's question plus my own question.
So we're getting near the end. So you've been with a lot of new teams, staffs, some different levels, kind of like I said earlier. So relatively speaking, with those different areas, how do you create buy-in?
Oh man, the $1 million question.
Classic question.
So one of Samson's questions was, how do you create buy-in with your athletes and your colleagues? And I kind of put my spin on it. I think the longest he spent at one place was 3 years, his high school job, and everything else was 2 years or less. So being relatively new and also just not spending as much time to create as much buy-in, how does he go about doing that? Number 9, this was a Samson question.
So strength and conditioning as an industry, what do you think that we can all collectively do to help move this industry forward?
Oh man, again, that's another hot topic. I definitely have a lot of thoughts on that.
Question number 10.
And last big question, what's one actionable thing the listener can do tomorrow to start becoming better?
That's my own question. I think all of this theoretical stuff is fine and dandy, but if it doesn't turn into action, how we actually do our jobs and our lives, then kind of what's the point? And 11, last one.
Fantastic. Where can the listeners get more of you?
On this piece of paper, kind of that question number 3, when I talked about SEC, WAC, the Valley, Mountain West, I put the actual schools. I just wrote them back on just so I wouldn't get lost. I switched these 2 questions, and then at the bottom, I put he graduated from Southern Indiana, so we were in the same conference, just at different times, and that he knows, I won't say the athlete's name, but an athlete I used to train in Chicago that went on to play soccer and be one of his athletes. Almost at the end, here's some key considerations. Not every question you come up with has to be asked. There was 3 or 4 that I'd come up with just after my first round of going through the internet and my research that I ended up just deleting because I didn't like them, but that's totally okay. Don't ask crazy questions just for the sake of asking crazy questions. Yes, you want them to be unique and different, but they should still all be meaningful. It's okay to have some classic, generic questions that you ask everyone. What's the coolest story you have? I ask to all my interviewees that I interview, and it's classic, it's generic, but you get some really cool answers because of it. So don't be afraid of having half generic and half specific to them. You're allowed to change questions. Like I said, I switched the order of these. It didn't trip Lucas up too much. I just told him before, or just kind of on the fly. If you want to tweak something based on how the interview's going or just whatever it may be, they're your questions. You can do whatever you want with them. And another thing just to keep in the back of your mind is, how do you show that you did your research without saying, hey, I did my research? So it's a very fine line to walk. So you want to be thoughtful, right? And I think a good example is showing that quote or sharing that quote from his article that he wrote, where how else would I have gotten that quote from if I didn't read the article myself? It's not just about developing good questions. You have to be able to ask good follow-up questions to their answers. You have to be able to just have good conversation skills too. So it is important to set yourself up for success in creating these good questions, but if you have no ability to actively listen, right, come up with good follow-up questions on the fly and just have a good conversation, whether it's a networking phone call or for an interview as an interviewer or an interviewee, it doesn't really matter. So it's more than just the questions, you have to put it all together. Quick example of a follow-up question I made on the fly.
And last question on that topic, how many pounds does your beard add to your total?
Man, I don't know. It's about to get its own area code here before too long.
Before we started recording, we talked about our beards. I used to have a pretty long one myself. He said that his was the longest it's ever been due to just the quarantine and everything like that. And we were talking about his powerlifting experiences, just his own training, and that question just came up, gave us a good laugh. So there's just an example of that. Action steps, things you can actually start doing to help you create better questions. First, consume every piece of content there is about them. Their social media profiles, their LinkedIn profiles, their bios on websites of places they work or used to work. YouTube, if people decide to make YouTube videos for their own channel. If they've written articles for a personal blog or whatever it may be, read them. Now, if you get into things like books or podcasts, like I said earlier, that are a little bit longer, maybe listen to just the first half of it, the first quarter of it, skip around, just to become more familiar in things they could say. Create a ton of questions, some generic, some specific. The more you have, the more you create, you're increasing the odds of creating a good question. As you're going through their content, literally anything that pops up in your head is, that's cool, or that's interesting, write it down. Hashtags pop up. I just saw soccer pop up twice, so he's done that multiple times. And just, you'd be surprised how many things kind of just jump out at you. Don't discredit those thoughts of things jumping out at you. Lastly, once you have a ton of questions, let them sit for a few days and then review them. Because it's when you're in that mindset and the questions are fresh, taking some time away is going to kind of give you a new lens to look at those questions. So it can be exciting when you have, cool opportunities, whether it's to network with someone or for an interview, but take some time off, let the questions sit, become a little more fresh in your mind whenever you come back to them, and you'll be able to pick the best ones. And my closing thoughts is that creating better questions, it's a skill. It's a process. The more you do it, the better you'll become at it. I've done 30 plus interviews on my own podcast. This was my second one for SAMSON. I've made, I don't even know how many phone calls in my recent just job search and networking efforts. And I've definitely gotten better at it. And it's cool that it's your opportunity. You have control over the questions you ask these people to, like I said, give value back to them in this networking, exchanging of value context. So own it, take pride in it, and have fun with it too. You get to ask literally whatever you want. As always, you can get all the gear I use for my videos from Amazon. Links are all in the description below. And you can get all of the music I use for my videos from Epidemic Sounds.